position merely through hereditary succession or having title to lands. 163. Admission to the higher ordenes broad distinction and privileges, but also a number of responsibilities. In antiquity, a city depended on its leading citizens to fund public works, events, and services, munera, rather than on tax revenues, which primarily supported the military. Maintaining one's rank required massive personal expenditures. 164. Decurions were so vital for the functioning of cities that in the later empire, as the ranks of the town councils became depleted, those who had risen to the Senate were encouraged by the central government to give up their seats and return to their hometowns, in an effort to sustain civic life. 165. In the later empire, the dignitas, worth, esteem, that attended on senatorial or equestrian rank was refined further with titles such as vir illustris, illustrious man. 166. The appellation clarissimus, Greek lamprotatos, was used to designate the dignitas of certain senators and their immediate family, including women. 167. Grades of equestrian status proliferated. Those in imperial service were ranked by per grade: sexagenarius, 60,000 sesterces per annum; centenarius, 100,000; ducenarius, 200,000. The title eminentissimus, most eminent, Greek execotatos, was reserved for equestrians who had been praetorian prefects. The higher equestrian officials in general were perfectissimi, most distinguished, Greek gesimotator; the lower merely egregii, outstanding, Greek kratistus. 168. Unequal justice. As the republican principle of citizens' equality under the law faded, the symbolic and social privileges of upper classes led to an informal division of Roman society into those who had acquired greater honors, honestiores, and those who were humbler folk, humiliores. In general, honestiores were the members of 3 higher orders along with certain military officers. 169. The granting of universal citizenship in condemned man attacked by a leopard in the arena, 3rd century mosaic from Tunisia. 212 seems to have increased the competitive urge among the upper classes to have their superiority over other citizens affirmed, particularly within the justice system. 170. Sentencing depended on the judgment of the presiding official as to the relative worth, dignitas, of the defendant. An honestier could pay a fine when convicted of a crime for which an humilier might receive a scourging. 171. Execution, which had been an infrequent legal penalty for free men under the Republic even in a capital case. 172. Could be quick and relatively painless for the imperial citizen considered more honorable, while those deemed inferior might suffer the kinds of torture and prolonged death previously reserved for slaves, such as crucifixion and condemnation to the beasts as a spectacle in the arena. 173. In the early empire, those who converted to Christianity could lose their standing as honestiores, especially if they declined to fulfill the religious aspects of their civic responsibilities, and thus became subject to punishments that created the conditions of martyrdom. 174. Government and military. Forum of Jurasa, Jurash in present-day Jordan, with columns marking a covered walkway, for vendor stalls, and a semicircular space for public speaking. The 3 major elements of the imperial Roman state were the central government, the military, and the provincial government. 175. The military established control of a territory through war, but after a city or people was brought under treaty, their military mission turned to policing, protecting Roman citizens. After 212 AD, all freeborn inhabitants of the empire, the agricultural fields that fed them, and religious sites. 176. Without modern instruments of either mass communication or mass destruction, the Romans lacked sufficient manpower or resources to impose their rule through force alone. Cooperation with local power elites was necessary to maintain order, collect information, and extract revenue. The Romans often exploited internal political divisions by supporting one faction over another. In the view of Plutarch, it was discord between factions within cities that led to the loss of self-governance. 177. Communities with demonstrated loyalty to Rome retained their own laws, could collect their own taxes locally, and in exceptional cases were exempt from Roman taxation. Legal privileges and relative independence were an incentive to remain in good standing with Rome. 178. Roman government was thus limited, but efficient in its use of the resources available to it. 179. Central government. The imperial cult of ancient Rome identified emperors and some members of their families with their divinely sanctioned authority, auctoritas, of the Roman state. The rite of apotheosis, also called consecratio, signified the deceased emperor's deification and acknowledged his role as father of the people, similar to the concept of a paterfamilias soul or manes being honored by his sons. 181. Reconstructed statue of Augustus as Jove, holding scepter and orb, first half of 1st century AD. 180. The dominance of the emperor was based on the consolidation of certain powers from several republican offices, including the inviolability of the tribunes of the people and the authority of the censors to manipulate the hierarchy of Roman society. 182. The emperor also made himself the central religious authority as Pontifex Maximus, and centralized the right to declare war, ratify treaties, and negotiate with foreign leaders. 183. While these functions were clearly defined during the Principate, the emperor's powers over time became less constitutional and more monarchical, culminating in the Dominate. 184. Antoninus Pius, reigned 138–161, wearing a toga, Hermitage Museum. The emperor was the ultimate authority in policy and decision-making. But in the early Principate, he was expected to be accessible to individuals from all walks of life and to deal personally with official business and petitions. A bureaucracy formed around him only gradually. 185. The Julio-Claudian emperors relied on an informal body of advisors that included not only senators and equestrians, but trusted slaves and freedmen. 186. After Nero, few official influence of the latter was regarded with suspicion, and the emperor's council, Concilium, became subject to official appointment for the sake of greater transparency. 187. Though the Senate took a lead in policy discussions until the end of the Antonine dynasty, equestrians played an increasingly important role in the Concilium. 188. The women of the emperor's family often intervened directly in his decisions. Plotina exercised influence on both her husband Trajan and his successor Hadrian. Her influence was advertised by having her letters on official matters published, as a sign that the emperor was reasonable in his exercise of authority and listened to his people. 189. Access to the emperor by others might be gained at the daily reception, salutatio, a development of the traditional homage a client paid to his patron, public banquets hosted at the palace, and religious ceremonies. The common people who lacked this access could manifest their general approval or displeasure as a group at the games held in large venues. 190. By the 4th century, as urban centers decayed, the Christian emperors became remote figureheads who issued general rulings, no longer responding to individual petitions. 191. Although the Senate could do little short of assassination and open rebellion to contravene the will of Theopora, it survived the Augustan restoration and the turbulent year of the four emperors to retain its symbolic political centrality during the Principate. 192. The Senate legitimated the emperor's rule, and Theopora needed the experience of senators as legates, legati, to serve as generals, diplomats, and administrators. 193. A successful career required competence as an administrator and remaining in favor with the emperor, or over time perhaps multiple emperors. 194. The practical source of an emperor's power and authority was the military. The legionaries were paid by the imperial treasury, and swore an annual military oath of loyalty to the emperor, sacramentum. 195. The death of an emperor led to a crucial period of uncertainty and crisis. Most emperors indicated their choice of successor, usually a close family member or adopted heir. The new emperor had to seek a swift acknowledgement of his status and authority to stabilize the political landscape. No emperor could hope to survive, much less to reign, without the allegiance and loyalty of the Praetorian Guard and of the legions. To secure their loyalty, several emperors paid the donativum, a monetary reward. In theory, the Senate was entitled to choose the new emperor, but did so mindful of acclamation by the army or praetorians. 196. Military. Winged victory. Ancient Roman fresco of the Neronian era from Pompeii. The Roman Empire under Hadrian, ruled 117–138, showing the location of the Roman legions deployed in 125 AD after the Punic Wars. The Imperial Roman army was composed of professional soldiers who volunteered for 20 years of active duty and 5 years reserves. The transition to a professional military had begun during the late Republic and was one of the many profound shifts away from republicanism, under which an army of conscripts had exercised their responsibilities as citizens in defending the homeland in a campaign against a specific threat. For Imperial Rome, the military was a full-time career in itself. 197. The Romans expanded their war machine by organizing the communities that they conquered in Italy into a system that generated huge arrays of manpower for their army. Their main demand of all defeated enemies was they provide men for the Roman army every year. 198. The primary mission of the Roman military of the early empire was to preserve the Pax Romana. 199. The three major divisions of the military were the garrison at Rome, which includes the Praetorian Guard, the cohortes urbani and vigiles, who functioned as police and firefighters. The provincial army, comprising the Roman legions and the auxiliaries provided by the provinces, auxilia. The navy. The pervasiveness of military garrisons throughout the empire was a major influence in the process of cultural exchange and assimilation known as Romanization, particularly in regard to politics, the economy, armed religion. 200. Knowledge of the Roman military comes from a wide range of sources: Greek and Roman literary texts, coins with military themes, papyri preserving military documents, monuments such as Trajan's column and triumphal arches, which feature artistic depictions of both fighting men and military machines, the archaeology of military burials, battle sites, and camps, and inscriptions, including military diplomas, epitaphs, and dedications. 201. Through his military reforms, which included consolidating or disbanding units of questionable loyalty, Augustus changed and regularized the legion, down to the hobnail pattern on the soles of army boots. A legion was organized into 10 cohorts, each of which comprised 6 centuries, with a century further made up of 10 squads. Contubernea. The exact size of the imperial legion, which is most likely to have been determined by logistics, has been estimated to range from 4,800 to 5,280.202. Relief panel from Trajan's column in Rome, showing the building of a fort and the reception of a Dacian embassy in 9 AD. Germanic tribes wiped out 3 full legions in the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. This disastrous event reduced the number of legions to 25. The total of the legions would later be increased again and for the next 300 years always be a little above or below 30.203. The army had about 300,000 soldiers in the 1st century, and under 400,000 in the 2 ND, significantly smaller than the collective armed forces of the territories it conquered. No more than 2% of adult males living in the empire served in the imperial army. 204. Augustus also created the Praetorian Guard 9 cohorts, ostensibly to maintain the public peace, which were garrisoned in Italy. Better paid than the legionaries, the Praetorians served only 16 years. 205. The auxilia were recruited from among the non-citizens. Organized in smaller units of roughly cohort strength, they were paid less than the legionaries, and after 25 years of service were rewarded with Roman citizenship, also extended to their sons. According to Tacitus, 206, there were roughly as many auxiliaries as there were legionaries. The auxilia thus amounted to around 125,000 men, implying approximately 250 auxiliary regiments. 207. The Roman cavalry of the earliest empire were primarily from Celtic, Hispanic or Germanic areas. Several aspects of training and equipment, such as the four-horned saddle, derived from the Celts, as noted by Arrian and indicated by archaeology. 208. The Roman navy, Latin, classi, fleet, not only aided in the supply and transport of the legions but also helped in the protection of the frontiers along the rivers Rhine and Danube. Another of its duties was the protection of the crucial maritime trade routes against the threat of pirates. It patrolled the whole of the Mediterranean, parts of the North Atlantic coasts, and the Black Sea. Nevertheless, the army was considered the senior and more prestigious branch. 209. Provincial government. An annexed territory became a Roman province in a 3-step process, making a register of cities, taking a census of the population, and surveying the land. 210. Further government record-keeping included births and deaths, real estate transactions, taxes, and juridical proceedings. 211. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, the central government sent out around 160 officials each year to govern outside Italy. 21. Among these officials were the Roman governors, either magistrates elected at Rome who in the name of the Roman people governed senatorial provinces, or governors, usually of equestrian rank, who held their imperium on behalf of the emperor in imperial provinces, most notably Roman Egypt. 212. A governor had to make himself accessible to the people he governed, but he could delegate various duties. 213. His staff, however, was minimal. His official attendants, apparitores, including lictors, heralds, messengers, scribes, and bodyguards, legates, both civil and military, usually of equestrian rank, and friends, ranging in age and experience, who accompanied him unofficially. 213. Other officials were appointed as supervisors of government finances. 21. Separating fiscal responsibility from justice and administration was a reform of the imperial era. Under the Republic, provincial governors and tax farmers could exploit local populations for personal gain more freely. 214. Equestrian procurators whose authority was originally extrajudicial and extra-constitutional managed both state-owned property and the vast personal property of the emperor, res privata. 213. because Roman government officials were few in number, a provincial who needed help with a legal dispute or criminal case might seek out any Roman perceived to have some official capacity, such as a procurator or a military officer, including centurions down to the lowly stationer or military police. 250